Welcome to our sharing on the second half of St. John's Gospel. We are in chapter 18 and I want to pick up in verse 28. And here we begin the trial of Jesus before Pilate. In John's Gospel, this is the real trial of Jesus of Nazareth. He has already been tried before the people of Israel in the first half of the Gospel in his mission, and now he is to be tried before the cosmos, before the unbelieving world. And the drama that takes place here is absolutely incredible. I want to read it even though you know it very well. They then led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was now morning. They did not go into the praetorium themselves, or they would have been defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So Pilate came outside to them, and they said, "What charge do you bring against this man?" And they replied, "If he were not a criminal, we would not be handing him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and try him by your own law." The Jews answered, "We are not allowed to put a man to death." So it's obvious already, we haven't brought this man to you just for any reason. This man is to die. And this was to fulfill the words of Jesus spoken about indicating the way that he was going to die. So now we come before the world powers. Pilate is a pagan. His Roman soldiers are pagans. They're into false gods, different philosophies. They've no idea what truth is. They wouldn't know a light if you put it in front of their eyes. So there's no way they'll recognize the light of the world. But before we start, I want to remind you of something that's actually in Luke's Gospel, chapter 2, verse 35. When Jesus was an infant, the prophet Simeon said that this child would bring about the fall and the rising of many in Israel, and in the process that the secret thoughts of many hearts would be revealed. Now, we're going into what is the biggest drama of the Passion of Jesus, that is before his actual dying, in this trial. And as we do, the secret thoughts of everybody is going to be revealed. Jesus simply stands there in silence, and he's like an X-ray vision that actually shows up everything that's there. And without participating in any of their arguments, while saying almost nothing, he's able to bring the whole thing up to the surface. All the scum comes to the surface, and all the evil that's in all the people all around him comes to the surface. It's really extraordinary. As I said in the last episode, the reason why John doesn't give the trial before the Sanhedrin is because he's dealt with it already in the first half of the Gospel. So in this trial before the world powers, we see that the cosmos, the unbelieving world, also must decide for or against the light. God has become man. He came to the whole earth. He didn't just come for Israel. And so the whole earth has to make this decision. So he's brought on trial before the representative of the greatest world power at the time, the Roman Empire. And so the decision that will be made by Pilate is made in the name of the whole cosmos. That in alone would make you nervous. Okay, I've told you that there are 3 stages here, like a drama in 3 parts playing out at the same time, where you have in the front stage, you have Pilate dealing with the Sanhedrin and the crowds that join as well. You have Jesus in the background, absolutely silent most of the time. And in the center, we will have Jesus being tortured by the Roman soldiers. Now, what we're going to see is that Pilate goes from one to the other. When Pilate goes out front stage, he's meeting raucous noise, shouts, he's meeting accusations, he's meeting hatred, he's meeting revenge, he's meeting absolute frenzy out there in the front. And then he goes back to question Jesus in the back. And he meets a very calm, quiet, silent, non-violent, non-political human being. And in going from one to the other, it's perfectly obvious, even to somebody like Pilate, that there are two different worlds. But because he's a pagan and an unbeliever, and he's not a deep man, he's actually very shallow, he's not able to handle the fact of going from one world to the other. And the more he goes from one to the other, the more confused he gets. And as he goes from one to the other, all of his own weaknesses come to the surface. And the Jewish leaders on the outside see his weakness, see his inability to make a decision, see that he doesn't actually know the issues that are involved. And so they discover they can manipulate him. And Jesus never changes. He remains totally himself. But it's actually sad to see this man, Pilate, disintegrating in a situation he should never have been involved in, because there was no way he could understand the issues that were at stake. Pilate makes a drastic mistake. He makes many drastic mistakes, but one of them is that he thinks he can barter with the Jewish elders. But the Sanhedrin and all Israel is painfully aware that this man, Pilate, absolutely hates the Jews. He hates everything about them, and he has been and continues to be very cruel towards them. So they're of no mind to barter with this man. They are going to use him to get what they want, which is to kill Jesus. And in doing it, they'll bring Pilate down, because they will get Pilate to actually kill a man he declares 3 times is innocent. Now, 3 times is very solemn. So if they manage to get Pilate to kill an innocent man, then they know they only have to send a little whisper to Rome, and Pilate will be relieved of his job. So the Jewish leaders can see that they actually have 2 victims. They can get rid of Pilate and get rid of Jesus. They can get rid of both. So a very, very dangerous, ugly political game starts, in which nobody actually benefits. It is a very destructive game that actually happens. And if we look at the game that plays out, instead of just simply looking at the surface of the event, Pilate said this, they said that, this happened to Jesus, they said this. When you look at it like that, you don't get what's going on. Because John wants you to see Pilate is lost in the unbelieving world. The Jewish priesthood is also lost in the unbelieving world with regard to Jesus, okay? Because they are operating on the level of below. And the Jewish crowd are operating out of revenge and jealousy and hatred of Jesus. And also revenge and hatred and jealousy of Pilate. Now, those 3 are 3 major doors for the spirit of evil to enter into them. Major door. Sin is the door. We've already explained that. Jesus said, Satan has no power over me, because nobody can convict me of sin. Sin is the door that allows the evil spirit in. So when they're operating out of these huge evil motivations, it means the door is wide open for Satan to take over. And what Satan is going to do, and you need to realize, he is the real opponent to Jesus. Pilate is only a puppet, and really the chief priests are as well, even though they're all responsible as adults and intelligent people for what they do. The real enemy is Satan. And what he does is he gets a drama to happen that absolutely destroys Pilate, destroys the Jewish priests, and kills Jesus. Nobody in this is going to benefit. So let me give you just some idea of what happens. It is so incredible that, it's actually in some way quite difficult to describe it. Pilate succeeds in forcing the Jewish people to deny their messianic hopes and choosing the secular world, choosing the cosmos. We're going to see that as we go through it. Once the Jewish high priests, who are the chief authority in Israel, once they do that, they no longer have any right to be a nation. It's important that you understand this. The state that we call Palestine or Israel, or originally it was called the land of Canaan, that area, that territory was given to the Jewish people on condition of keeping the covenant with Moses. They were in the land on leasehold. And when they would break the covenant very severely, they were sent out into exile in Assyria, they were sent out in exile to Babylonia, and after the death of Jesus, they're going to be sent out in exile to the rest of the world. They have no right to stay in the land if they actually break the covenant of Moses. So it's going to be a very dramatic moment when the chief priests of Israel declare publicly before the authority of Rome, we have no king except Caesar. It's so dramatic, it's so terrifying, because they had to know what they were doing. So Pilate forced that out of them because they forced him to kill an innocent man. Okay. So they will have no right to exist as a chosen people in that land, and 40 years later they will be destroyed. So the Jewish leaders force Pilate to kill an innocent man, and as soon as the message will reach Rome, the Caesar in Rome was very intolerant of any of his governors committing any kind of a political crime. And he would simply send a message to the person to either commit suicide or go into exile. So as a result of this very dramatic event, Pilate will lose his job and he will be sent into exile. So he's going to lose out. And in the middle of it all, the innocent victim, the Lamb of God, the beautiful Son of the Eternal Father, will also lose his life. Everybody will lose out. Now, when you go back to John chapter 11, verses 48 to 50, Caiaphas was holding a meeting of the Jewish Sanhedrin, and they were all worried that everybody was believing in Jesus, and they said, well, look, if we let him go on like this, everybody will believe in him. Now, this is Caiaphas speaking. And the Romans will come and they will destroy the holy place and the nation. And so it's better for one man to die instead of the whole nation being destroyed. Okay. The incredible thing is that they actually engineer the death of Jesus, and they force the Roman authorities to actually do it. And 40 years later, the Romans still came and destroyed the temple and destroyed the city in AD 70. It went on for a couple of years before that as well. But they, the Jewish Sanhedrin, also lost everything. They lost their temple, they lost their city, they lost their nation, they lost their people. The very things they were clinging on to and trying to preserve their institutions and everything went. And so we have to look at this drama that happens, that is called the trial of Jesus before Pilate, and realize that John is trying to tell us, look behind the events. Look at the issues that are going on in the background. Look at the results, and you will realize that this is not a simple event. That there is an unseen presence that Jesus is very conscious of. And that unseen presence is called in John's Gospel the Prince of this world. But if you go to the book of Revelation, also written by John, and you go to chapter 9 and verse 11, John will name the Prince of this world as the destroyer. In Hebrew, Abaddon, and in Greek, Apollyon, but translated into English, the destroyer. And in this conflict between the high priests and Pilate, Abaddon, the destroyer, the prince of this world, actually destroys them all. Evil doesn't love. Evil doesn't have any good. And being a follower of the prince of this world does not guarantee you any safety, because the prince of this world does not love his followers. And when you look at this and look at the way Jesus loves and the way Jesus protects his followers and the way Jesus cares, you can see the two kingdoms more and more clearly, and it actually helps us to make a better decision. Amazingly, in the midst of all of this chaos, all of this noise, all of this terror for Jesus, in the middle of it all, John proclaims Jesus the King of the Jews. John shows this very clearly. And it is the representatives of Caesar, it is the representatives of the cosmos that actually crown Jesus, even though they crown him with thorns. Actually dress him in a royal robe, even though it is a robe of mockery. Actually put a mace, which a king uses to show his authority, actually put it into his hand, even though it's done in mockery. And so Jesus is crowned and he is acknowledged and they adore him, even though they do it in mockery. And he is enthroned on the cross, and he is proclaimed in the three main languages of the world of that day. Jesus of Nazareth is the King of the Jews. John wants you to see this. And he wants you to see that if you don't go behind the scenes, if you get stuck on the surface, you're just not going to see what is being done. And not only that, but when we get into this, and you see how much I have to introduce it for you. When we get into it, you will see that it appears as if Pilate is the judge. But Pilate isn't the judge. When Pilate says to Jesus, I have the authority to either kill you or leave you alive, Jesus says, no, you haven't. You wouldn't be able to do anything unless it was given to you from on high. And then Jesus turns and actually judges Pilate. He says, you're not the most guilty. The most guilty are the ones who've handed me over to you. That begins with Judas, then the high priests, and then Pilate. And Jesus apportions judgment to each one of them. Just you go back into the book of Genesis in chapter 3, and guilt was apportioned to Adam, Eve, and the serpent. All of them. Everyone involved in the tragedy. Everyone involved in the drama. They all had to take responsibility. And that's the importance of Jesus telling the man who slapped his face, don't get involved. Don't get involved in this. Don't have in your history that you actually signed your name to the death of the Son of God. Don't have that. It mustn't happen. Okay. So let's come and at least begin to read this. John gives us the trial of Jesus and the death of Jesus. It's like a drama you put on a stage, and he gives you scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, scene 5, one after the other. And each one is a complete piece by itself. And what John wants you to do, of course, is that you would contemplate it and that you would come to understand something of the wonder and the beauty of what God is doing in all of this disaster. It is really something else. Verse 28 of chapter 18, and we're in scene 1. And the first thing we're told, it's at daybreak, because people in hot countries arise very early. And the chief priests take Jesus to the praetorium. Now, the praetorium, the just beside the temple in Jerusalem was the Antonia fortress, where the Roman authorities kept a very close watch on everything that went on in the temple. They could literally look down and see everything that was going on, because at the time of the Jewish feasts, the religious feelings could get very, very high, and there could be revolutions and so on. So the Roman soldiers kept a very tight guard on what was going on. There was a particular place where the Roman governor would meet anybody who needed to bring a prisoner forward, and it was sort of the outdoor courtroom. And then we're told they didn't go into the courtroom because they might be defiled. I find that utterly amazing. These men are bringing Jesus, an innocent victim, before an unjust judge to get him killed at any cost. And they won't go into the praetorium for fear that they would be defiled and wouldn't be able to participate in the Passover. Do they not know that premeditated murder is defilement? Do they not know that hatred and jealousy and destructiveness, that all of this is defilement? Don't they know anything? I hope we do. I'll continue this in the next episode. Thank you for listening. Slán agus beannacht déilibh. Goodbye. God bless you.
Problems, worries, sadness. Are you seeking solutions?
Bible says,
Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Choose faith over fear.